said, I am really excited to introduce you to my new friend, Brittany from Elon University. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for making time for this session. My name is Brittany Slaughter, and I am the Director of Regional Admissions for Elon University. I am based in Southern California, but I work with our students all over the West Coast. I am from California. I went to Elon, so I know what it's like to look at colleges and be an out-of-state student. But I am personally really excited to talk about this topic because as someone who reviews thousands of college admissions applications every year and essays, the essay is probably one of my favorite things to read. It's our opportunity to get to know you. It is the topic that I think is also the most daunting. You're being told that this one essay could potentially be the thing that gets you into college. And while I think there's some truth to that, there's a little bit more nuance to it. So my goal today is that whether you're applying on the Common App or to the UC Personal Insight questions, you will feel confident in addressing what, that process and being prepared for it. So as you have questions, like Amy said, if you could drop your questions into the chat, I will do my very best to answer them at the end. And we'll save some time for questions at the end as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. Why is the college essay so important? It's easy for a college to look at a transcript and decide, is this student a good academic fit? But we want to make sure that you're going to be a good character fit as well. We certainly want to admit students who are going to be able to hold their own academically, but for universities that do what's called a holistic admissions process, they're looking at the whole student. They do what sometimes I like to refer to as the roommate test. They want to know that you're going to be a great peer and a great student in the classroom setting, but how are you going to collaborate with, work with, be connected to that campus community as well. So colleges are able to get a good sense for that by understanding how you have grown or changed, not in the last 8 years of your life. While certainly a lot of that has happened, they are really curious as to what that has looked like for you in high school. And I think, we want to know more than just who you are as a GPA or as a test score. And increasingly, test scores are not even used. We really want to get beyond that and know what matters to you, what inspires you, what really makes you tick. So this is one of, I think, the few aspects of the college application as a whole that you really have control over. By the time you're applying, your 9th, 10th, 11th grade transcript, there's not really a lot that can be changed there. If you're someone who is working to prepare for an SAT or an ACT, there's only so much studying and prepping that you can do before you're running out of time to set that in. You've already got 3 years of activities, extracurriculars that you've been involved in. You don't get to see what your teachers or your counselor letters of recommendation look like. So your essay is really this really important piece that helps us to get to know who you are. When I'm working with students on writing their essays, I always say, what do you want the admissions committee to know about who you are, where you're really coming from? So we'll start there. So what are some things that you should really be focusing on? Again, think about who you are and what you want to convey in the application process. Are you really driven? Do you have a passion for the STEM field? Are you really inquisitive? Are you athletic? Where are these things going to be highlighted in the other parts of your application? And if they aren't anywhere in your application, like your activities or your transcript, potentially letters of recommendation, I think it's really important to make sure that you highlight those things in the essay. So reflection or growth during an important time of your life is definitely, I think one of the prompts is even asking you to do that. Highlighting something that you maybe haven't been able to cover on your application. Let's say you have a hobby for restoring old cars. It's kind of hard to list that as an activity. Maybe you end up writing an essay on that. When you are writing the the ability to showcase your critical thinking, your writing style, your critical thinking skills is also really important. We want this document to be typo-free, grammatically correct. In addition to getting to know who you are as a person, we also, again, want to make sure that you're going to be a good academic fit for the institution as well. So those are things to still keep in mind in addition to the content. Essays are really subjective. So as you're approaching preparing, what topic to write about, I want you to write what you want to write versus what you think we colleges want to hear. When we review colleges at Elon, or excuse me, when we review applications at Elon, we will typically have 2 to 3 people review each application. And what I might think about an essay versus what another colleague might think about an essay, we're going to have different opinions. We're coming to the table certainly with different biases, which as admissions counselors, we are trained to keep in check. But, different biases, different lived experiences, different opinions, talking about something really polarizing. Let's say you're going to talk about politics in your essay. That's fine. Talk about your activism and why your interest in politics is so high versus settling on that discussion point about why your politics look like that, because I could be completely aligned with you and that's great, but that could be really off-putting to someone else. So I think write what you want to write and be more concerned about the lesson or the story that you're telling about who you are versus what you think we want to hear. So let's talk a little bit next about the types of writing that colleges see. If you're applying using the Common Application, that personal statement, your essay is obviously a big part. There are also typically supplemental questions that colleges will have you write. If you're planning to apply to any of the UCs or state schools, the personal statement is replaced with something that we call personal insight questions. So you'll have smaller essays that you need to write. Sometimes a college might see an artistic portfolio, and on an even more micro level, if you are communicating with colleges, an admissions counselor, we're going to see your writing demonstrated in an email, in a letter, sometimes even in a text message. So I think, first impressions are really important, but you want to make sure that even those types of writing are from you, are showcasing who you are, and again, are typo-free, grammatically correct, right? We all are human error exists, but you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward when it comes to even those styles of writing. And we'll talk about those in just a little bit. Now, let's talk about the Common App for a second. The Common Application personal statement goes to every single college that you apply to via the Common App. So be sure that you're not making any college-specific commentary within that essay. I shared with you, I work for Elon University, which is in North Carolina. And sometimes a student will say something about, they really can't wait to attend Duke University. Duke is just 40 minutes down the road, and we often have students who apply to both. Not a great thing to put in an essay. I know immediately where their head's at. That's very telling for me. That's something that's more appropriate for a supplemental question. So you really want to make sure that the personal statement is appropriate, and whether you're applying to 7 colleges, 10 colleges, that it is appropriate for all 10 of those colleges. Typically, students are writing anywhere between 500 to 650 words on this essay. 650 is your word count, and it will kind of cut you off there. I think anything less than 500, hopefully you're able to tell your full story in a paragraph or 2. That is, I think, hard to do. And in my opinion, also kind of a missed opportunity to continue to drive home to an admissions committee who you are and what you might bring to their campus. So now the Common App has 7 different prompts for you to choose from. The first one being, what's the story that makes you you? Maybe there's a family tradition that is really unique to you or something like that. That is a topic you can choose from. The second one, which I feel like is the most common, Certainly the one I read the most is overcoming an obstacle. What's something that you have navigated in the last, really try to focus on the last 4 years. We don't want to hear about how you overcame something in 4th grade. Let's really focus on that reflection, that growth that's happened during your time in high school. Topic number 3, when have you questioned a belief or a movement? Number 4, what's a problem you have solved or want to solve? Number 5, give us a period of personal growth. Again, that could be at any point in high school. Let's keep it to those 4 years. What is something that causes you to lose all track of time? This is a cool way to highlight a passion or an interest or something that you're really curious about. And then finally, topic of your choice. And I would say this is the other one that we see a lot. I often get the question, well, which prompt should I do? Which is the best prompt to do? And ultimately, it comes down to you. Which prompt speaks to you? If you're looking at this list of prompts right now, and you're like, man, 1 through 6, I don't really relate to, but man, number 7, topic of choice, there are a lot of things that I could write about. That's probably the one that you should focus on. If that overcoming an obstacle one is really speaking to you, you immediately knew like, okay, I'm going to write about this. Then that's probably the one that you should choose. So there's not, colleges don't have a preference. Select the prompt that means the most to you. Now, the University of California, like I said, if you're applying to any of those schools, I know, I saw a good question. I thought we were applying for a school, not telling our life story. And that is a good thing to think about. Let's come back here for a second. Yeah, you are applying for a school, but oftentimes it is sharing your life story that helps us to get to know who you are and the type of student that you can be. I think being vulnerable and sharing something about yourself, like that's how we're going to get to know you beyond just your 3.5 GPA. So if you're, feeling stuck about how to start some of these prompts, I've got definitely some questions to ask you to get some ideas going. We'll talk about that in just a second, but there is going to require, I think, a little bit of vulnerability on your part to, again, share a passion and interest, a part of your past, so that we can get to know who you are beyond just the numbers. All right, so let's come back to these personal insight questions. Which personal insight questions you choose is entirely up to you. But you should, again, much like the Common App prompt, you should select questions that are most relevant to your experience and that you feel best reflect just your individual circumstances. There are 8 different questions to choose from. And again, you have 4 that you need to pick. And unlike the personal statement for the Common application, the personal insight questions are a maximum of about 350 words. And the UC app, actually, they do a really good job of telling you, like, here's the question, and this is what we are looking for. Now, obviously, I don't work for the University of California system, but I do help students write these. I think that's a really cool thing that the UCs do. They're very specific in telling you, this is what we're looking for in this answer. So again, look at those prompts and see which question speaks to you. Let's say you're an avid soccer player, you're captain of the soccer team. You also work at a sporting goods store, like that's great. Be sure to not just talk about soccer in each one of those 4 responses. Make sure that you are covering a gamut of things about yourself. And again, the personal insight questions and how they're written are really good about helping you figure out what you should write in those. So if you're planning on applying to both out-of-state institutions or private institutions, as well as the UCs, you can see this is, it starts to add up to feel like a lot of writing. So the fact that you're thinking about this right now and starting to work on it, I think you're really serving yourself well as you head into your senior year, and hopefully taking a little bit of stress off your plate, because it is quite a bit of writing, quite honestly, that you're going to have to work on. So all right, the next thing I want to talk about are supplemental essays. And this comes back to the Common App. If you're applying to 7 schools, 5 of the schools on your list might have specific supplemental questions that you need to answer. I think one of the most common supplemental questions is, why do you want to attend XYZ school? If all 5 of your colleges on that list are having that question, you have 5 very different essays that you're going to need to write, because the reason that you are applying to college X, college Y, and college Z are probably all different. Certainly they may have the same major, but you could see yourself going to that college for very different reasons. So I always tell students, you should not be able to copy and paste your answer from college A to college B to college C. The why you want to attend that school is a very personal answer, personal response. So again, you'll want to make sure that you save time to work on these pieces of writing, not the night before it's due. I think a lot of times students think, oh, it's just a supplemental question. It's an extra question. It's not as important. But I would say that these supplemental essay prompts are oftentimes just as important, if not more so, than the personal statement. And truly, I share that with you not to stress you out, but to be really upfront with you. These can be really helpful, really insightful questions. With the new Supreme Court ruling that came down this summer, a lot of admissions offices have changed the supplemental questions that they are asking this year to get a better sense of who you are and how you identify. You're not able to use that information in the admissions process anymore. But if we're able to get a sense for who you are from a statement that you share with us, that is information that we can use. So a couple other, I think, really unique essay or supplemental essay prompts that are on here. Give us your top 10 list. This is a really vague statement. Top 10 list of what? So this is a cool way for you to highlight your creativity. Maybe, you're a surfer and you want to talk about your top 10 favorite surfing spots, or you're a really big fan of anime and you're going to list your top 10 favorite anime books or something. This is, again, a way for you to highlight a unique part of who you are. And again, give us some insight as to who you are. Yeah. Supplemental essays are, I think, really fun to read just from an admissions counselor perspective. But they do require, I think, a little bit more careful planning than just the personal statement that you've written. So make sure to save your time for that. So some advice for supplemental questions, and some of this I've already talked a little bit about already. Supplemental essays really should be unique to each school. Maybe you can utilize some ideas or some concepts from one supplemental essay to another, but they really should be very different because you're applying to each school for a different reason. Really do your research. If you can include experiences from your own background or interests that support the school's values, especially that question, why do you want to be here? I think that is always really helpful. It's really telling when a student has basically just Googled the school's mission statement or mission and values and has kind of copy and pasted it there. So be really intentional to that response and make sure you're bringing it back to your own experiences. I do see one question. I want to address it right now. The personal statement is going to be that big college essay. So that's what it's called on the Common App. Personal statement is the big college essay. The supplemental questions will be anywhere between 2 to 5 additional questions that are unique to each college that you're applying to. So, for example, let's say you're applying only to schools that utilize the Common Application. You've got your big personal statement that is going to go to every single college you apply to. And you might have anywhere between 5 to 12 smaller supplemental questions that you need to address that will go to each individual college. So that's, 6 to 12 individual unique pieces of writing to work on. If you're also then including the personal insight questions, the UC application, that's an additional 4 pieces of writing that you need to work on. So 12, 13, 14, 15, up to 16, basically statements that you're working on. And again, I share this with you and tally all this up for you, not to scare you, not to stress you out, but to be really transparent that you do need to have time to work on these essays as you apply. Now, let's come back to advice for working on your supplemental questions. I think if you can dig for ways to make the supplemental question, your response really personal, is helpful. You know, these are ways in which we are getting to know you on a deeper level. So the best way to, I think, brighten a, a generic answer is to make it personal to you. So again, any way that you're able to be vulnerable or share who you are is really key here. And finally, get creative with your research. Go beyond the school's website to learn about, what they're all about. If you're going to visit colleges, or if you have a friend who's already there, reach out, get to know a current student, connect with a professor. These are great ways for you to demonstrate your interest in a school, but also just great general ways for you to research, like, is this school a good fit for me? Sure, as an admissions office, we're going to let you know if you even get into the school, but you need to make the decision as well. Is this college going to be a great fit for me? So there's it serves you in two ways: to support you in the application process, but just to support you in your general research and understanding for, is this college going to be a good fit for me? All right, so other writing that you can submit with an application. Right now, via the common application, there are two sections to be mindful of. One is the additional information section. And this is, I want you to think of it like the free space on a bingo card. Use it to your advantage. Maybe you'd like to address a dip in your grades, or why you had an extended absence. Maybe you want to talk about a family matter that impacted schooling, or why science is a passion of yours. Only use this space if you feel like you have really important details to highlight. Remember, it goes to every single college on your Common App list. So you still don't want to write like, I really want to go to XYZ school here, because it will go to every single college. But more often than not, I see students using the additional information section to address maybe, a diagnosis with ADHD late in high school, and that's why their grades really struggled, but then took off their junior year, or that they were, out with mono for a month and they missed a ton of school. So you don't have to use additional information. It's there to help you if you want to explain things further. But you also, again, don't have to use it if you don't feel like you need to explain things further. Now, the community disruption statement really relates back to more recently the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's really helpful to share anything about that incident here that has significantly impacted your time at home or your time at school. You all will have your freshman year as being that COVID timeframe. So if online school is really hard for you and you feel like you want to share that here, utilize this section of the application. We as admissions offices understand that, we were all impacted by COVID, right? So we're not going to hold it against you that, your grades were really bad that first semester because online school was hard for you. But if we're not able to understand anywhere in your application that online school was hard for you and it wasn't just a hard freshman year, that's why you utilize this part of the application. So you don't want to leave the admissions office with any questions about who you are. So if you feel like talking about in the community disruption statement, like, I was not a great online learner, I really struggled with staying focused. And while you can see that in my grades, when we returned to school, like things really improved. If you need to include something like that, that's great. Another example of utilizing that community disruption statement, life was really hard for me during COVID-19. Both my parents were first responders and had to work, and I was alone a lot and lonely, or was stressed and anxious by observing something like that, or God forbid, maybe you lost a family member during that time frame. So that is a way in which you can utilize the community disruption statement. Other writing you may have to submit alongside the common application. Education progression. One of the questions on the application is, what high school do you attend? Have you attended any other high schools or have you moved at all? That is, you can just share, I moved high schools because my family moved, or I switched high schools because online learning was better for me here, or this high school is a better fit. So make sure you're including why you changed schools. And then the other one is disciplinary information. If you're a student who finds yourself having to talk about a time that maybe you were suspended or caught plagiarizing, caught violating an honor code or some type of behavior code, I think it's really important to be upfront about what those details are, explain the situation, address how it was handled, and how you have moved on since that time frame. I think there's a lot of fear about talking about a suspension or an expulsion. Those students end up at colleges. So we want to get a sense for what was the incident, what have you learned from that? It doesn't necessarily mean a no. It means that we're going to take an extra look and get a sense for who you are and what's happened since that incident. But I think being upfront and honest with that information as we ask for it is better than us maybe finding out from a teacher or a counselor letter of recommendation. So I want to come back to the chat and just check questions. All right, we answered that one. Can you elaborate more on the Supreme Court ruling and what it has to do with applications? Absolutely. So the Supreme Court this summer released a decision basically that colleges could not utilize affirmative action during the application review process. So asking questions like, what is your race and ethnicity? What is your background? Were no longer deemed constitutional. So we will no longer be able to utilize that information to make an admissions decision. Some colleges were utilizing it. The UCs, have not been utilizing that information for many years now. So if you're curious, I would, do a quick Google search on the Supreme Court's official decision. What colleges are focusing on in this is that colleges are able to be very intentional with how they recruit and connect with students. But again, they have to be careful with how they review and use information in the application process. So colleges are not changing how they recruit and connect with students, but maybe they're changing slightly the types of questions that they ask. So being able to ask the question, what's your favorite part of your identity and how does it make you who you are today is a great way for a student to maybe share, I'm a first generation college student and come from XYZ family. We're able to get at that information in a way that can be helpful and still insightful for us. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help or hurt your application. What it allows us to do is to build a fuller picture and a more complete picture as the type of student that you are. So I hope that helps. Okay, we answered the personal statement ones. Let's see. What do you mean by supplementals? Okay. I think we talked a little bit about these already. I'm going to come back. So your supplemental essay prompts will go to let's say you apply to 5 schools on the common application, and all 5 of those schools will have a supplemental question. They want to know, why do you attend, or why do you want to attend our school? And maybe another one of these examples on this list. So schools will have maybe 1 to 2 supplemental questions that they'll ask you to address. That is what I mean when I mean supplemental questions. So you've got the personal statement, which is the big essay, remember, and then you'll have some schools that will have these supplemental essays to choose from. Not every school will have a supplemental essay, but most do. So that's what I mean when I keep referring to supplementals. All right. I'm going to keep going. We talked about these. We talked about different writing. All right. So these are common topics that we see in college essays. You can still use these topics, but I want you to come back to the question about how is this topic unique to you? So students talking about sports or travel, any type of injuries or illness, Influential parents or family members. I think that is a topic that we see a lot. I love reading about why a student is inspired by their aunt or their grandparent or a parent, someone close to them. But one of the things you have to be mindful of is that you are writing about how this person has impacted you and who you are today, and not why your grandma is so amazing, because we're not admitting your grandma to college. We are admitting you to college. So we see these themes as being very common, but that's okay. Again, how are you making this topic relating back to you and who you are? I think being brave, having a little vulnerability in any of these topics are helpful as well. Now, how can you be successful if you're choosing one of these topics or if you're going a different direction? You're doing it already and you're here today. You're starting early. You're thinking about what you want to write. I think the fact that you're here today, you're going to start thinking about topics that you want to write about, all very helpful. Read each essay prompt individually. Which one speaks to you? Do you get really excited about like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to write about something that I've overcome, a fear that I've overcome. This is what it's going to be. Maybe you need to explore that idea a little bit more. If you're reading these prompts and feeling stuck, just push that prompt aside. Come back to it at a later date if you're still feeling stuck. But write about the things that excite you or that you want to brainstorm early. The next one I have is don't abuse the thesaurus. You know, we can see your English grades. If you're submitting test scores, we can see your, your SAT and ACT scores. We can also tell if you're using ChatGPT, and don't get me wrong, I have played around with ChatGPT. It is very interesting. I had it write an essay for me talking about transformation and growth. And it was a really beautiful, 550 word statement. The amount of time and effort that it would have taken me to go through and to edit that and make it personal for me, you might as well have just created your own essay there. So it's a generic, very average essay. So as you are working on your own essay, I think make sure it sounds like you and still has your voice. If you're editing through with a parent or with a teacher, I think that's great, but you want to make sure that your voice is coming through. It's interesting when we suddenly see really elaborate vocabulary in a student who has had maybe straight B's or just average grades in an English class. You can kind of tell that you have overused the thesaurus there. So don't lose your voice. It's okay if you're not using all of those big words all the time. You are 17, 18 years old, still learning. You want your voice to really come out in all of these pieces of writing. I shared this one already, but don't talk about someone else in detail. Make sure that as you are writing about how your grandparent inspired you, that you bring it back to those lessons and what's happened today with them, not like what your grandparent has done. So we talked about that already. Be concise. Unlike an essay that you have in an English class where you have enough time to introduce the topic, present the topic in 2 or 3 different paragraphs, and then wrap things up really beautifully, you need to grab the reader's attention immediately. So start at that most exciting point, then fill in the background information, and then wrap up your essay beautifully. So really get to the point quickly and say what you want to say. A lot of times we have students who use really flowery, like overly descriptive language, and sometimes that works. But if you have an essay that's full of that, it's really hard to get to the immediate point that you're trying to make. One thing that I think is really wonderful about the college essay, whether it's for the personal insight questions or the common application, is that you don't have to be overtly formal. It can almost be conversational, like you and I are sitting here having a conversation, a stream of consciousness almost. You also don't want to use slang. So I think you have to find this point of like being like ultra, slang or shorthand or abbreviations to being overtly formal. You want to find a nice kind of like middle spot. I think a great trick for finding that as you're working on your essay, if you've completed your first draft, put it into Google Translate, just in English, and have it read sections back to you. And if it sounds overtly wordy, it probably is. You can probably go back and kind of wordsmith it a little bit. Be accurate, be honest. You know, perhaps we're given insight as to who you are from a counselor or a teacher, and it is, you know, in opposition to what you've shared in an essay. So don't try and elaborate on things dishonestly. Don't bore the reader and rewrite your resume. I'm going to use the example of the soccer player again. You play soccer, you have your whole life, you're the soccer captain, you work at an athletic store, you volunteer and teach and coach soccer for, you know, a little league in your area. What are you going to write your essay about? Hopefully not soccer, because we already know from this part of your application, your activities, we know that soccer is a passion of yours, that you're a leader, that you connect with your community. Talk about something else. Don't regurgitate the information that we already have in your application. You know, it's a missed opportunity if we talk about soccer again, right? Talk about something that inspires you. Talk about a passion of yours outside of soccer. Maybe, you know, maybe it is staying athletically fit and how you want to study exercise science, you know, something like that. But don't rewrite your resume in the essay, because we already get that information from other parts of your application. If you feel like you can write passionately or really excited about a topic, it's probably going to come off that you are excited and passionate and enthusiastic about a topic. Don't force it if you're not excited about it. We want to feel and see that enthusiasm. And finally, the last piece of information I like to share is show, don't tell. And I'm going to give you some examples of this. So instead of telling us, you know, I am a really hardworking and curious student, show us a little bit more. So here's an example. After devouring hours of CNN and every New York Times article on the election, I decided to get involved with the local politics in my community. For the month leading up to the election in 2012, I spent 2 hours a day knocking on doors with a local nonprofit, registering neighbors to vote and get involved. Well, that's great, because we now see that hardworking and curious because they've spent a ton of time getting to know both local and national politics, and they put that into action by connecting and going door to door with their neighbors. So it was a little bit more insightful on their end. Another example, I love to dance and I'm really good at it. Let's show it instead of telling it. I won my first dance competition when I was 12. After years of practice and studying with renowned ballet schools across the country, I began a pre-professional dance program at the School of American Ballet. So again, much more detail there. Still concise, but much more detail. And we can, you know, get from this student that dancing, again, is a passion of theirs. They've been doing it for a big chunk of their life. So I think that this is really great advice as you're starting to, again, highlight those things that are important to you. Make sure you are showing and not just telling us. All right, a couple final just reminders. Check for punctuation, capitalization, misspellings. That's something that you can do at the very end. It's very likely that you will have multiple drafts of your essays, whether that's the personal statement, your supplemental questions, or those personal insight questions if you're applying to the UCs. So you can do that as kind of like the very last step. Do check for content and check for spelling. I think these are a couple good examples of students who are writing a story and maybe you weren't thinking clearly through a concept. That second one down, I never personally experienced death until my grandfather died. Well, of course, you have not personally experienced death because you are alive right now and telling us this story. So be mindful of content there and how you write that. The next one down, I have made the horror roll every semester. Spell check is not going to catch this. I know you meant the honor roll every semester, but you really want to comb through at the very end and look for those finer details there. I do think it's great to have another set of eyes on your essay, preferably someone who's not read it yet. It does not have to be a parent. And if there are parents in the audience today, I want you to hear your child does not have to share this with you. And don't take it personally. It's a vulnerable piece of writing that maybe they're not ready to share with you, but you can rely on English teachers, maybe get a close friend, maybe you go ask Miss Bencomo to help you review your essay a little bit. So do have an extra set of eyes who can take a look at it just before you submit. Now, at the very beginning, I did say that there are other types of writing that colleges can look at. Obviously, we talked about that additional information section, but emails or texts are one. I give my cell phone number out to students that I work with if they have questions about the application. Sometimes our system, our like communication system, will send a text on my behalf just to remind a student of something. If we were all in a room together, I would ask you right now, how many of you have received texts or emails from colleges already? Colleges that maybe you're not even interested in. We have your information. We're trying to get connected with you. Hesitate replying back to that email with something nasty, like, I don't want to hear from you anymore, or something, God forbid, worse, which unfortunately we've seen. Even though these messages are going out automated to you, there is a human on the other side. So if you would prefer to be removed from a school's email or text message listserv, just reply, on a text, like, I'd like to opt out, or please stop, or in an email. Legally, they're required to provide you with an unsubscribe button. So know that there are humans on the other side of that. We know you're getting slammed with tons of communication, and we don't want to bug you if you don't want to be bugged. So I think you can respectfully tell us to stop, but just know if you're writing something nasty, that's a reflection of you, your school, and who knows, maybe you just change your mind and decide you want to apply one day. So I know lots of college ads and emails. It is the season of life. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to set up a separate college email from maybe the email that you use every day, or your own high school email. That way you can kind of control those messages a little bit more. I know it can really feel like you're just inundated with messages all the time. Letters or notes, other writing that we might look at. Maybe you visit a college, or you sit down with a college rep at your high school and you're like, man, that was just a great experience. I'm going to send a thank you note, like, thanks so much for your time today, or I loved my campus tour. Those are really meaningful. It's certainly, right, a demonstration of your interest, which for some colleges is really important. They want to know that you're excited and interested in their college, and that could potentially impact an admissions decision. But I think a handwritten letter or a note, even just a quick email, is always really meaningful. So I'm sure I could probably keep talking to you all day about questions or comments that you have about the essay writing process. If you have questions, you can certainly email them to me on there. But I do want to go ahead and open it up for questions from other folks. So if anyone has questions from the audience, I'm happy to answer those for you now.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I mean, this was actually really good insight. And the students may not fully appreciate it because you're just starting your college application experience, but I've been in this for a while, and I got some refreshed news. So the way you communicate is important. I actually do a presentation on how to email adults for our students, because when you are reaching out to these college admission representatives, they're not your bros. You want to address them by their name, and you want to give a salutation. So this is all good. So I'm going to be quiet. Prospect students know they know where to find me if they have any questions. But if you need to jump off for something else, please say thank you before you leave. And then if you have questions, take advantage of it now. We have about 5 more minutes.
I did get one question in the chat just privately to me, and I think it is a helpful one to address for all. But the question was, is it okay if I write my essay about something that I'm not interested in? I'm going to be applying for pre-med, but I don't want to write my essay about pre-med. Absolutely, that is okay. Just because you're thinking that maybe you want to study engineering does not mean that you have to write about engineering. Now, this is where the question comes in of, it all depends. And your college counselor can help you figure this out. But, you know, there are some schools and some programs out there where they want to specifically know why you want to apply for business or why you want to apply for engineering. And typically, those are those supplemental questions that the school will require of you. So it'll be clear about what you need to write about. But you absolutely do not have to write in your essay, like, well, I want to become a doctor one day, because like, highlight something else that shines on who you are. You know, maybe you completed your Girl Scout Gold Award, and so that's highlighting your loyalty, your dedication, your drive, your leadership, your community engagement. I mean, those are all great things to have in the quality of, you know, a pre-med student. So just because you know what you want to be one day and you're applying for a specific program does not mean that you have to write about that. All right, I'm just checking in the chat for any other questions. Oh, yep, I will put my email down one more time for folks. And actually, if you are, well, I know I am based in Southern California, so unfortunately I don't get to work with Northern California anymore, but I'm also going to put down the name and email of your local rep. Her name is Mandie Corcoran, and she's wonderful. And she's a local resource for you. So I'll put her email in the chat as well. I just had to remember it. So you can meet with her, particularly if you're interested in Elon. I know she'd be happy to chat with you. Any other questions? Anyone wants to unmute?
I
Thank
am
you so much.
Amy,
Yeah, so I want to tell the students, be strategic about the schools that you apply to. Gyms like Elon offer great scholarships. They know California students well, and so they try to make it competitive for you to attend their schools. So take a closer look, and I really appreciate your time and expertise here.
yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure. Best of luck to all of you as you work on these pieces of writing and your applications.